My name is Sarah Reynolds. I'm 27 years old, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Maplewood, just outside the city. It's the kind of place where you feel safe enough to leave your doors unlocked. At least, that's what I thought before that weekend. My husband, Mark, was out of town for a business trip, so I had the house to myself for a few days. I was looking forward to some alone time, catching up on shows, and enjoying the peace and quiet. But by the second night, the quiet didn't feel so peaceful anymore. It started with small noises, creaks in the attic, the occasional soft thump. I chalked it up to the house settling, like we all do when we're home alone and trying not to freak ourselves out. I even convinced myself it was probably just squirrels or raccoons getting into the roof. The first night, I managed to sleep just fine, despite the little disturbances. The next night was different. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to fall asleep when I heard it. A distinct sound. It wasn't the usual creaking or rustling. It was footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the attic right above my bedroom. My heart skipped a beat. I paused, listening carefully, hoping it was just my imagination. But no, the sound continued, soft but heavy, like someone was trying to be quiet but couldn't help the weight of their steps. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. There shouldn't have been anyone up there. I hadn't gone into the attic in weeks, and Mark was miles away. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Grabbing my phone, I dialed 911 with shaky hands. I told the dispatcher about the footsteps, feeling embarrassed but also too scared to care. They assured me they would send an officer over to check things out. When the police arrived, 2 officers did a thorough sweep of the house, including the attic. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, no one hiding in the shadows. The attic was just as dusty and cluttered as it had always been. They reassured me it was probably just the house making noises and left after taking my statement. I tried to convince myself they were right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. After the police left, I locked every door and window in the house and crawled back into bed, trying to calm my nerves. I was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept glancing toward the ceiling, half expecting to hear those footsteps again. Then, something caught my eye. On the hardwood floor, leading from the attic door at the end of the hallway toward my bedroom, were muddy footprints. They were faint but unmistakable. My stomach dropped as I followed the trail with my eyes. The footprints stopped right at the door to my room. I hadn't noticed them when the police were here. Had they been there before? Or had they appeared afterward? Suddenly, I felt cold, like all the warmth had drained out of the room. I knew I had to get out of the house, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, every muscle tensed, my mind screaming at me to run. My eyes darted toward the closet, a creeping dread slowly filling me. The closet door was slightly ajar, just enough for someone to hide behind. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move, inching toward the closet. My hands trembled as I reached for the door handle, barely able to grip it. Slowly, I pulled it open. There, crouched in the corner, was a man. His skin was pale, his eyes wide and bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. He held a knife in one hand, the blade glinting in the dim light. His lips curled into a sickening smile as he whispered, "I've been watching you." My mind went blank, pure terror flooding every part of me. Somehow, I managed to scream and bolt out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I ran down the stairs, not daring to look back, and out the front door into the street, my heart pounding like a drum. I didn't stop until I was at my neighbor's house, banging on the door, barely able to speak. They called the police again, and within minutes, officers were back at my house. They searched every corner, every inch of the attic and basement, but the man was gone. They found muddy footprints, leading from the attic window to the closet, and a few more outside, leading into the woods behind the house. But he had vanished. The police never caught him, and to this day, I don't know who he was or how long he had been hiding in my attic, watching me, waiting. I moved out of that house the following month. I couldn't stay there after that night, knowing someone had been living in my home, just above my head, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My name is Jacob Miller. I'm 30 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Detroit. It's the kind of place where everyone keeps to themselves. I've been living here with my wife, Emily, for about 3 years. We know our neighbors, but only on a wave and nod basis. That's how it always was, especially with Mr. Harrison, the elderly man who lived next door. Harrison wasn't unfriendly, just odd. He was the type to spend hours in his backyard, tinkering with his garden, or standing by his fence staring off into the distance. I didn't think much of him, assuming he was just a lonely old man. One evening, Emily was working late, and I was home alone. I was lounging on the couch, watching TV, when I noticed movement outside through the blinds. It was Mr. Harrison, out in his yard again. He was hunched over, struggling with something near the ground. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't sure what he was doing, but I figured I'd offer him a hand if he needed it. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The evening air was cool, and the street was eerily quiet. As I approached the fence, I realized Harrison wasn't struggling with a plant or his tools. He was digging a hole. A large one. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the hole, partially covered by dirt, was what looked like an arm. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze in place, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It couldn't be real. Maybe it was just some trash, or a mannequin, or something. But no, the more I looked, the clearer it became. There was a body in that hole. I turned to leave, my mind racing, but my foot caught on the edge of the fence, making a loud scraping noise. Harrison looked up. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I felt my blood run cold. But instead of panicking, Harrison smiled, a calm, unsettling smile, and waved me over. "Jacob, just the man I needed," he called out, as if we were old friends. Come in. Let's have some coffee." Every fiber in my body told me to run, but I didn't. I was too stunned, too terrified to think straight. I forced a weak smile, muttered something about being busy, and backed away slowly. Harrison's smile faded slightly, but he didn't push. "Suit yourself," he said, his voice almost casual, "but you should stop by sometime. We could talk." I nodded, quickly turning on my heel, and walked back to my house, my hands shaking. The moment I got inside, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and grabbed my phone. I should have called the police. I knew that, but I didn't. I was too scared. What if I was wrong? What if it wasn't a body? Or worse, what if Harrison saw me call? I didn't know what he was capable of, and I wasn't about to find out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little noise outside made me jump. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the image of that arm over and over. I kept telling myself I'd call the police in the morning, but I wasn't sure if I'd make it through the night without losing my mind. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise. It was faint at first, just a soft creak, like wood bending under weight. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound came again, louder this time, the back door creaking open. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed and crept downstairs, my whole body trembling. As I reached the kitchen, I saw the back door was slightly ajar. Standing in the doorway, shovel in hand, was Harrison. He looked at me with that same unsettling smile, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "I thought I'd give you a little visit, Jacob," he whispered, his voice low and menacing. You know, you saw something you shouldn't have. But don't worry, I'm not angry. Just thought I'd give you a friendly warning. You're next unless you keep quiet." The shovel scraped against the floor as he took a step closer. I didn't wait for him to come any nearer. I swung the bat with all my strength, catching him in the side. He grunted, staggering backward, and I ran for the front door, not looking back. I didn't care if he followed me or not. I just needed to get out of there. I spent the night at a friend's house and called the police first thing the next morning. By the time they arrived, Harrison was gone. His house was empty, the backyard neatly covered up. They found nothing. No body, no evidence of anything out of the ordinary. I moved out of that neighborhood the very next day. But even now, every time I hear a creak or a strange sound in the night, I wonder if Harrison is out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to come back. My name is Maria Thompson, and I'm 22 years old. Last summer, I was house sitting for my parents while they went on vacation. Their place is a bit isolated, on the outskirts of a small town in Oregon. I didn't mind being alone. I was used to the quiet, but that night, something happened that I'll never forget. It was just past midnight, and I was watching TV when the house phone rang. I found it strange because no one ever called the landline anymore. I picked it up, and there was silence on the other end for a few seconds before a voice, calm and unsettling, said, "I can see you." I froze. The voice wasn't angry or loud, just cold. Thinking it was a prank, I hung up. My heart was racing, but I tried to brush it off. Weirdos call random numbers all the time, right? About 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, the voice said, "I like how you're sitting on the couch." My stomach twisted. I was sitting on the couch, right where he said. I shot up and looked around the room, my eyes darting to the windows. All the curtains were drawn, but it felt like someone was watching me. I hung up again, trying to calm myself down. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I tried to convince myself there was no way someone could actually see me. But then the phone rang a third time. This time, the voice said, "You're pouring yourself a glass of water now." My blood ran cold. I had just gotten up to pour myself a drink. I didn't wait to hear any more. I hung up, locked all the doors and windows, and grabbed my phone to call the police. They told me to stay calm, stay on the line, and that they were tracing the call. Every second felt like an hour as I waited for them to figure out what was happening. Then the voice came again. "Looking out the window won't help, Maria. I'm closer than you think." He said my name this time, and I nearly dropped the phone. I felt sick. I hadn't told anyone I was house sitting, let alone my name. I raced upstairs to my parents' bedroom and locked myself inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. After what felt like an eternity, the police arrived. I heard their knock on the door and practically sprinted downstairs to let them in. I explained everything to the officers, and they immediately began searching the property. One of them stayed with me in the living room while the others checked outside. Then, one officer called for backup. They had traced the calls. The officer next to me glanced at me, his face serious. The calls were coming from inside the house, he said, his voice low. "From your basement." My stomach dropped. I had walked past the basement door so many times that night, never thinking twice about it. They opened the door and descended into the darkness, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the shadows. I stayed back, too terrified to follow. After a few minutes, they came back up. They had found him. A man, filthy, disheveled, with wide, crazed eyes, had been living down there. He had installed hidden cameras around the house weeks ago, posing as a repairman when my parents had some plumbing work done. He had been watching me the entire time, tracking every move I made. They arrested him, but the damage was done. The thought of him watching me knowing he was so close, still haunts me. I haven't been able to stay alone since. Every creak, every shadow feels like someone's there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. It's something I'll never forget, no matter how hard I try.